In country music history, few stories cut as deep as this one. In 2008, on a Swiss estate overlooking Lake Geneva, Shania Twain discovered that her husband and her closest friend had been sleeping together. That's where the story actually lives. Not on the stage in front of 80,000 people. Not in the recording studio in the middle of the night with the playback cranked and everything working. On a property in Corso, Switzerland, in a life that had been carefully and deliberately built, among people she had chosen to trust completely. She was born Eileen Regina Edwards in Windsor, Ontario in 1964 and grew up mostly in Timmins, a mining town 5 hours north of Toronto where the winters run long and the work is hard, and where the idea of becoming the best-selling female solo recording artist in history would have been a strange thing to say out loud. Her family was poor in ways that left permanent marks. She was performing in bars before she was old enough to drink in them. She sang country standards to rooms that were not always paying close attention. Her mother and stepfather died in a car accident on a highway near Wawa in 1987. She was 22. She moved home and raised her younger siblings, and to pay for it, she took a performing contract at Deerhurst Resort in Huntsville, Ontario, a venue where she performed 2 shows a night for 4 years to keep everyone housed and fed. That detail does not tend to make the magazine profiles. Mercury Nashville signed her in 1992. The debut album sold 37,000 copies in the United States, which was enough to keep the contract alive, but not enough to change anything meaningful. She was 29, and Nashville did not quite know what to do with her. Robert John Lange called in 1993. He went by Mutt. He had produced Back in Black for a CDC and Hysteria for Def Leppard, albums that had shifted somewhere north of 200 million units combined, and he was arguably the most commercially successful rock producer working at the time. He had heard a demo of hers through a mutual contact, picked up the phone, and called the office. They talked for hours. They started writing together by fax because this was 1993, and they were married 4 months after meeting in person for the first time. People who doubted this marriage were not quiet about it. A Northern Ontario country singer whose debut had underperformed, and a British rock producer who had never met her before the year they got engaged, people had strong opinions. The match was called improbable, then a business arrangement, then a phase that would correct itself. The Woman in Me came out in 1995 and went diamond in the United States. The doubters adjusted their position. Come On Over followed in November of 1997. It became the best-selling country album in history, and the best-selling album ever released by a female solo recording artist, somewhere around 40 million copies across multiple editions, in a commercial run that lasted years and reached markets country music had not previously opened. Man, I feel like a woman. That don't impress me much. From this moment on. And You're Still the One, which she wrote specifically about her marriage to Mutt, and specifically about the people who had assumed from the beginning that the marriage would not hold. Multiple songs from that record topped the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart, and the album crossed into the Billboard 200's upper tier for years running, in a way that redefined what the genre could commercially reach. What she was making was not purely country, and it was not purely pop. It was country pop, a fusion she helped push into the mainstream, and its commercial reach changed the conversation about what a country artist could be. The Country Music Association took notice. 5 Grammy Awards followed, including Best Country Album, recognition that placed her at the center of an industry that had once been uncertain about her. Artists who came after her, among them Taylor Swift and Carrie Underwood, have cited her specifically as a reason they believed a path existed. The Grand Ole Opry, the institution that had defined country music's traditions for decades, eventually welcomed her as part of that lineage. She had literally recorded a song about how wrong the skeptics were. By the time Come On Over was charting in territories she had never toured, they had left Nashville for Switzerland. They bought an estate in Corso on the north shore of Lake Geneva, a long way from Timmins and a long way from Music Row. The stretch of studios and label offices in Nashville that had first signed her and then struggled to categorize her. The estate was managed by a Swiss corporate executive named Frederick Thiébaud, and his wife, Marie-Anne, became close to Shania in those years, close enough to be the person she called, the one who knew what was actually happening in the marriage and in the life behind the public version of it. The affair had been going on for some time before Shania found out. When she did, she lost both of them at once. Her husband of 15 years and the woman she'd trusted more than anyone outside of that marriage. That particular shape of betrayal, where the two people who hurt you were also the two people who formed the walls of your life, doesn't leave a clean wound. It raises questions that are harder to close than the obvious ones. Not just who and for how long, but what was real, and when did it stop being real? And were the years she believed she understood actually something else entirely? She filed for divorce in 2008. Mutt and Marie-Anne eventually married. Somewhere in the years surrounding all of this, Shania had contracted Lyme disease from a tick bite in Virginia. The disease produced a range of symptoms that took years to properly understand, and in combination with the sustained stress of that period, it contributed to dysphonia, a condition where the vocal cords fail to coordinate the way they're supposed to. She could speak. Singing, with any reliability, was gone, and no one could tell her at the time whether that was going to change. In interviews over the years, she's described what it felt like to face the real possibility that the voice wasn't coming back. The voice that had supported her family in Huntsville. The voice that had been her instrument since she was a child, performing for rooms that weren't paying attention. She describes a period of genuine uncertainty about who she was without it, which makes a kind of sense, because she had been a singer before she had been anything else. Surgery followed in 2011 with a specialist who worked on the affected tissue with a laser. Recovery was slow, and it took longer still to know for certain whether it had worked. Now came out in 2017, her first album of original material in 15 years. She wrote most of it herself, without Mutt, and much of it addresses what happened, though not in the way a press release addresses things. It is more interior than that, less explained, and she let the songs carry what they were going to carry without spending much time in interviews translating them. The album did not chart the way Come On Over had. That was not a reasonable expectation for anything. But it sold across formats. She toured behind it into 2018, and the audiences that showed up came specifically for her rather than for the era she had come from. In 2010, she had married Frederick Thiébaud, the man whose wife had left him for her husband. They found each other through the specific experience of having been abandoned by the same two people at the same time. That is not a story that gets constructed for effect. That is the kind that forms in the wreckage of something else. She still performs. The voice is not exactly what it was. She has said that herself. It carries differently now, and certain things that once came easily require more work. But it holds. You're Still the One still plays on the radio, as often as it always did. And people who hear it in a grocery store or a car still mostly know all the words.